Does the State of the Nation address serve its intended purpose? What will it take to bring chaos in Parliament to an end? What is delaying the radical socio-economic transformation of the country? Has COSATU given up on its preferred 4,500 Rand national minimum wage? A very good afternoon to you. I'm Simpiwe Ngoane and this is Question Time. Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Simpiwe Ngoane, standing in for Mpotsedu. Now, President Jacob Zuma delivered his 10th State of the Nation address last Thursday. With the theme, the Year of Oliver Tambo, the much anticipated occasion was marked by interruptions from members of the opposition. Now, this resulted in chaos and violence when Economic Freedom Fighters members were kicked out of the House. The proceedings resumed after just about an hour, with President Jacob Zuma announcing the government's plan of action on addressing the country's current challenges. Now, these included, amongst others, the radical economic transformation, the land question, funding for higher education, and inequality in a society and the workplace. We are live, therefore you can call us and air your views on the following numbers: 089 110 4210, or tweet us your comments on our Twitter handle @QuestionTime24. Now, before we get into the discussion, let's have a look at this clip by President Jacob Zuma.
Oliver Tambo spoke clearly about this mission at the SACP anniversary meeting in London in 1981. He said, and I quote, "The objective of our struggle in South Africa, as set out in the Freedom Charter, encompasses economic emancipation. It is inconceivable for liberation to have meaning without a return of the wealth of the country to the people as a whole."
Now, joining us this afternoon, my guests are Beginjali Njali, COSATU General Secretary, and joining us from my Hatfield studio in Pretoria is Professor Lesiba Tifo, who is a political analyst. Mr. Njali, I'm going to start you there. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, what is delaying the radical socio-economic transformation of the country? I know it's been a buzzword for years now.
I think it's a lack of political will and to decisively implement the resolution that has been taken. It's been taken 3 years ago. When it comes to the implementation, we see very lately of that implementation. So we'll say it's political will, but maybe the government has not clear indication or plan as to what it means in the first place. So it becomes difficult in terms of implementing what we don't know what it is. In our earlier resolution as COSATU, what we wanted the government to do was what we were calling the name after the president of Brazil, the Lula moment, in terms of what he changed it in the last 5 years of his government, ending of corruption, advancing the minimum wage and the comprehensive social security, address the question of the state-owned enterprises. All those are not clearly coming out in our government plan.
All right. Now, Professor Lesiba in our Pretoria studios, a very good afternoon to you. The buzzword of President Jacob Zuma's speech has been radical economic transformation. So the question now is, how do we move beyond the rhetoric of radical economic transformation and then deliver on the specifics of its implementation in an economy that is hobbling? And of course, this has been an issue that has been going on for years, even way before the Economic Freedom Fighters' stance on this particular issue gained traction.
Well, look, to some extent, one can argue that there has been economic transformation, because if you read one of the works of the leading scholars called Amil Cabral, he speaks about the compradors. And the compradors are those who fought for liberation, and after taking over, they themselves perpetuate the very status quo that they fought against. What am I saying here? Indeed, there are limited beneficiaries post-1994. And if we don't change that trajectory, it will perpetuate itself to the extent that people may even argue things are worse off than they were in 1994. One, the status of education. Two, the status of health provision. Right. If you look at the two, yes, there is much to be desired, yet there is so much invested in the money. But when it comes to transforming the economy, yes, indeed, the government of South Africa has done fairly well. But my colleague speaks about political will. There is political will to the extent that it benefits the elite, the economically and politically connected. And that's what people are fighting against. Let the cake, the national cake, be shared according to each, according to his needs, and to each according to his contribution.
I'm actually glad that you two gentlemen have touched on the issue of political will, and you will both agree with me that the economy is not growing fast enough to create the much needed jobs. And one of the areas that the president touched on in his speech as packaged in the 9-point plan is the issue of inclusive growth. But then the question is, was his speech robust enough to inspire such inclusive growth? All right, we seem to have a problem getting to Professor Lesiba. I'm sure you've heard my question, Mr. Njalinjari. Was the President's speech robust enough to inspire such inclusive growth?
No, I think there's a mixed feeling. I think the question that you raised earlier as to what is the purpose of the State of the Nation address. Initially, we're thinking that is intending to give the broader framework. Yeah. And when the ministers in the budget speech, the different departments are going to give details in terms of those things. It has yet to be seen as to what the minister will say in terms of this regard. We don't believe that really, I mean, when we talk about the political will, the NDP in itself, I mean, there are two sections in the NDP that we don't agree with. One is the microeconomic policies. We don't think the NDP will be able to address the issues that Prof is talking about. It's not going to be in a position to transform our economy radically in terms of what it needed to be done. So we were just doing what we call it tumshongolo, moving on the same issues, expecting that we're going to get a different income. Our economy is not growing enough. It's not growing fast enough to absorb the people coming into the labor force. So we're expecting a miracle. Nothing in the plan clearly indicates that will ever address the question of the unemployment. In fact, it's growing. It's growing very, very fast. And if it's not addressed, I think we're facing a political unsustainability. Indeed, indeed.
Well, let's now take a look at one of what some of the viewers have to say about this particular matter. We've got Kennedy from Cape Town. A very good afternoon to you, Kennedy. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. I would like to say I heard the State of the Nation, and I think there was a lot of talk, but I didn't hear a lot of talk of a holistic approach to the education sector, since we know education is a key driver to any economy. And since 1994, I can understand that the economy has ups and downs. But surely we should have done much better to see Eastern Cape provinces, Polokwane provinces, almost matching provinces like Gauteng and Western Cape. But we don't see that. We still see the poor provinces, they are still poor until today, 20 years into democracy. On the land issues, we can understand there's a lot of hurdles to do those ones. But surely on education, I don't see any excuse there, and I didn't hear a lot about it. Thank you.
So, Kennedy, you reckon the government hasn't done enough to implement its mandate? Is that what you're saying? All right, we seem to have lost Kennedy, but then what's your take on Kennedy's assertion?
Look, there's a mixed feeling in terms of those things. As Prof was indicated that on some other aspect we have done it well. The issue is not the pace and the speed. The speed in terms of dealing with those issues does not address the needs of our people to the extent that is required. So we're doing a little bit well in terms of our economy. When the crisis hit us, we said we got something, the fundamental in place. Few years later, we're worse off in terms of those issues. But as we indicate the difficulties that we fall short in terms of our expectation, I think we need to appreciate that government has accepted that the issues of land and agriculture has to be done differently. If we want to really address the question of people, the liberation was about land, first and foremost. We have to address those issues, not just taking the land from white people to give to black people. We need to be able to capacitate people. They have to use the land for the beneficiation of the whole country in terms of dealing with those issues. The issues of mining, of course, the Deputy President talks about the mining sector as being the death traps in terms of many people dying in the mining industry. We appreciated that kind of stuff. The issue of the NHI, I think it was comforting to hear the President says we still believe in the universal health coverage. Though we don't believe in terms of the pace, we think the Minister of Health has not done enough to realize that we're going to get the NHI in our lifetime. He talks about the question of the free education for those deserving students, in terms we call it for the poor students.
All right.
But it's not coming up at the pace that is required.
All right, we'll leave you there for now. And a reminder that you can call us and air your views on the following numbers: 089 110 4210. Question time. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Look, we need to talk. I just need some space.
Claim your extra cold space with the new 500ml fridge pack.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Welcome back. You're still watching Question Time, and my guests are Peginjal Njali, COSATU General Secretary, and joining us from my Hatfield studio is Professor Lesiba Tefo, who is a political analyst. Good to have you back, Professor. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, President Zuma's critics say this year's speech is almost a carbon copy of the previous addresses, with more talk and less action, and of course, no implementation of the issues espoused in the previous addresses. Are they right?
Yeah, they are very much right. And you can even predict the next State of the Nation address 2018 if it is going to be given by the same person. But the issue here is, at least for once, if we can see implementation of the minimum wage, and indeed a reconceptualization of the redistribution of the land. You give the land to the people who are less interested in farming, in tilling the land, and you say, here is an option between the land and money. They opt for money because they understand the profound meaning of land. It is about our entity. It's about our heritage. It's about those who have passed on, those who are living, and those who are to come. And you and I are the custodians, and we should leave it in a better place than we found it. So empower and capacitate those that are given, and indeed it should be worthy people who can do that. And that doesn't suggest that the whites who are using the land productively, it must be taken from them. There's too much fallow land in South Africa that those who are interested can be given. But if you take functional, productive land and farms, only for them to be fallow because you gave to those who are connected. I am not in support of that. But at least I concede that there were some positive elements for me. And what is not missing is not planning, not plans, not laws or policies, is implementation.
Indeed.
And indeed, when you implement, appoint the implementers on merit. Let meritocracy be at the center of the appointment of the people who are going to preside over state institutions and the land redistributed.
Indeed, and this has actually prompted the calls for more land debates or for more debates regarding the land issue in the country. We've got Ibrahim on the line from Cape Town. A very good afternoon to you, Ibrahim. Thank you so much for calling.
Thanks. I just want to make 2 points. I mean, black economic empowerment, since its inception, has always been biased towards the black middle class, the black middle to upper classes.
Yeah.
It is not in its design and form. It was never of such a nature that it actually sought to bring working class people in a more inclusive way into the economy. So I see a repetition of that biasness in the ANC's now, which seems to be a rehashed so-called radical economic transformation mission or project. I've heard about, the main thing is about fast-tracking the transfer of ownership from white hands to the black middle class and the black elite. Now listen, this is a very complex matter. I mean, I'm not opposed to that. I do believe that it's an indictment on the ANC that in 22 years of democracy, whites still have such significant control over different parts of the economy. So indeed, there is definitely a need for racial transformation at the top level. But this mission or project of the ANC repeats the mistakes or maintain the shortcoming of the black economic empowerment policy, which is it fails, again, to show concretely how it seeks to respond to the economic needs of working class people. And for me, that is fundamentally the challenge, right? It seems to be an ANC that are responding to the outcry of business people.
All right.
The outcry of the business or the black elite, okay?
Right.
But its main constituency, which it always seems to claim, which is the working class and the poor people, seem not to be adequately and concretely being catered for in its project and in its policies.
All right,
and for
Ibrahim,
me,
thank you so much for your time.
Really,
thank you so much for calling. Ibrahim is lamenting that the black middle class are not actually incorporated into the benefits of, for instance, the black economic empowerment. Do you agree?
Look, when people were talking about the broad BEE was exactly on the complaints that it is not a policy that will benefit the majority. It was intended to some extent de-racialize the ownership. What we need is more than that one. We need an economy that has to grow. It's not a question of just cutting the existing cake in the man and hope that everybody is going to enjoy the benefit. It is not meant in that way. But secondly, as long as the economy is not growing, as long as the structure of the economy is based on exporting, that most of the people who own this economy are now, listed in London, that they took and migrate and take the profit to London. They will not see any benefit to beneficiate, because if they do, it means they have to pay more tax here. They will rather take the raw material and set up the company overseas where they can be able to make more profit. Unless we change all that issues, we go beyond the question of who owns the economy and then say the society as the whole, how can they be able to benefit? We're going to be just moving around hoping for different outcome in terms of those issues. So we need some new thinking. We need really new thinking in terms of how can we change the economy. We need to develop our manufacturing. We didn't hear any proposal from the president. Maybe when the other ministers in the economic cluster table their budget speech, they will be able to give some input in terms of how that goal is going to be achieved.
All right. Do you hold your thought there, Mr. Nchanchalwe? We've got Siyabonga from Khayelitsha. A very good afternoon to you, Siyabonga. Thank you for calling.
Afternoon, sir. You turn on the Siyabonga the Cape Town.
All right. How can our guest help you to that?
Yes, no analithemba kwakhuluma kulo rhulumente sina because yijonga kulanda minimum wage ye 3,500. How can you see it for 3,500? The own people tell you can pay 3,500. It's fine. That means anathema because what I see now, the black is rich is getting more rich, the poor is getting more poor, and then no one care about that. You just need a vote to get. It's like a lady. That means in ngaphezulu endlini abanaxesha laba poor. Just is talking, then we see the family is getting more rich, businessmen, the son is busy, everybody is getting rich in the politician, but the poor is nothing done. Thanks.
All right, Nkosi Tata. Thank you so much for calling. All right, he's lamenting about the national minimum wage, and it's one of the issues that we need to robustly discuss here. He's saying that 3,500 rand is nothing, basically.
Yeah, but it's better than what the current position is. We're talking about vulnerable workers here that neither no unions or anybody speak on their behalf. So if you compare and you look to those sectoral determination from the domestic to the agricultural to the tax industries, all those sectors, on average, they are earning about 12 rand per hour. So if you look at 20 rand per hour and you look at them, some of them is always about 50% increase from where they are. So we can complain about, and I think the many people who are going to complain are those who are well off, who really think about those particular vulnerable workers.
Sure.
So we should not blame when government is making something positive. It's a responsibility of trade unions, for an example, to organize those people and negotiate for a better wage. It's not a living wage. I think the Deputy President has accepted that particular issues, but it's better than nothing. Those people who are, it's like when people are getting the RDP. Those who live in luxury house, we said, what is an RDP? It's better than nothing. But people who are really getting the RDP, getting houses for the first time, they really appreciated that one. Okay. Rather than condemning it, I think we need to find a way how we address the wage income policy so that we can be able to move to a better position.
Now, Professor, having said that, in an ideal world, the national minimum wage could be set at the level of the living wage. But then in contemporary South Africa, the current wage and the gap between the current wage and the living wage is so huge for it to be bridged by the implementation of the minimum wage. So are we looking at an unattainable scheme here?
No. I think, let me comment my colleague here. The previous two callers are making a good point here, namely that inequality is growing. And then if you take the black community, white community out of the equation, who are the principal beneficiaries of post-1994 dispensation? Are the black elite, are the connected few. And the gap between them and the poor and the wretched of the earth is growing by the day. Hence, the natives at the bottom of the rung are restless because of poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And they measure themselves against their own, not against the white man. And I'm saying 20 rand per hour, it's not enough, but it's a good start. But there is a point I want to make here. South Africa is not a poor country. It's well-resourced and it's very rich, comparatively speaking. Unfortunately, it's undermanaged and mismanaged. Okay. If you can just get the right people in the positions and ensure that there is no corruption, you'll suddenly realize how rich this country is and how much is there to share amongst ourselves before we can even go elsewhere to go and ask for money That hard truth must be told, and the leadership must ask itself. If anything, things are getting worse. Yet, comparatively speaking, we are not a poor country. We are just failing our people because of sheer greed, avarice, nepotism, corruption, and all that destroyed liberation movements.
All right. Professor Leseba, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for your time. And many thanks to you, Mr. Njanjali, for your time and for your insights.
Thank you.
Well, that is question time for today. Big thank you to my guest, Mr. Njanjali, COSATU's Secretary General, and of course, Professor Leseba at our Pretoria studios. And for you at home for watching. Till next time then, bye-bye.